It's about 5 lines of code to let an AI jump on a face-to-face
Yeah.
call. Will AI have the conversations instead of the reps? Dogs can wear bandanas. I was like, let me cut the bandana in half, sell one half to the owner, the other half to the dog. And that's like a combo deal. The average Canadian is in 6 figures of debt. The cost of everything, it went up. The salaries didn't move much. The population's very squeezed out. There was no point in me staying here.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SDR Hire podcast. If you're new to this channel, this is a place where you can learn about top producing salespeople, what do companies look like, how does sales even look like these days. And on that note, I have a very unique person here on the podcast today with me. His name is Nick Tomic. He's the founder of a company called Face to Face. And face to face actually allows you to have a conversation face to face with a prospect who is visiting your website right now. And so, without further ado, I think this explains the gist of the conversation in of itself. And so, Nick, man, thank you for taking the time and chatting with me today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for the intro, Stefan. How's it going?
Yeah, going pretty well. Just scouting for some interesting salespeople and tech sales founders that I can kind of bring on to the show. And, with that in mind, you have a very unique product. And I think, it's fresh and hot new technology, which people are utilizing to an extent. I know other tools that are similar. For example, I think Wormly is the name. Obviously, there's a B2B in this space who's identifying the visitors on a different level. Obviously, what you can do with that data is completely different than what you guys are doing. But anyway, it's a very interesting and hot topic. And I just love the fact that there's somebody from this region who's doing something like this. By the way, is Nick your actual name, or is it Nicola and then you kind of go by Nick? Because your English is super American. Like, have you lived there? Are you from America? Like, what's your start in it?
I'm from Canada. I grew up in Canada, born and raised, lived there for 22 years, and I came to Serbia 3 years ago.
Oh, awesome. I mean, I never knew that. That's really awesome, man. What brought you back? Like the roots, wanted to explore, or did you have like active family who you were constantly were you back and forth with over to Serbia? Like, what did that look like growing up?
Yeah, I came here every summer throughout my life, and then I had a startup in Canada throughout COVID. I wrote a post about it today. I actually blew
Yeah, I
$500,000 on
saw.
that one. And then the day that I signed the closure papers, I signed the closure papers at 10 a.m. and I was on a flight to Belgrade at 2 p.m. So that's sort
Interesting.
of the story. Yeah.
What drove that decision? Did you see something in Belgrade or Serbia or this region in particular that you liked that drove you here, or were you just kind of sick of and like tired potentially of the startup world over there? Like, what was the motivation?
No, I mean, COVID changed Canada a lot. I don't know about the other countries, but Canada definitely went downhill substantially during COVID.
Mm.
And I was planning to move even before that, but then after COVID, it was like there was no point in me staying here. The cost of everything, it went up. The salaries didn't move much. The population's very squeezed out. The average Canadian is in 6 figures of debt, personal, uncollateralized. We're not talking mortgages, not car loans, but like uncollateralized debt. So it makes it a very tough business environment to be in, especially as a startup guy. So yeah, I don't know, Serbia seemed like a really good place to come at the time, and I think I made the right choice.
That's cool, man. I love that. Okay, no, I totally understand that. I mean, obviously, COVID changed everything, even for us. It had some upsides when it comes to like consumption online, and people were buying like in a frenzy, which they, to be fair, they were in a frenzy, but definitely a lot of changes. Awesome, man. And so, this is your, I don't know which startup that you're currently running. Like, how did you even end up as an entrepreneur? And then, like, what drove you to the GTM tech space that you're in right now?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I how did I become an entrepreneur? I mean, like I think that's a tough question to ask any entrepreneur. Everybody has a different story. Mine is extremely cliche. I didn't have a lemonade stand, but I did sell chewing gum in front of my house. So, that's I guess that's the start of it. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, so it's sort of the only thing I'm genetically able to do. Complete aversion to any kind of structure, rule following. It's when I was 17 years old, I was supposed to come to Serbia for the summer, and 3 days before my flight, one of my friends, she's like, "Let's go grab ice cream." I thought it was a date. We come there, and she tells me, "Nick, I met this guy. You need to meet him." I'm like, okay, what's that about? She's like, he's 27. He's a growth consultant. He's making $500,000 a year, and he's opening a school for wannabe entrepreneurs. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I went there the next day. I met the guy, and he was holding a talk about thinking outside the box, right? And he was a huge gamer, so he used all these gaming analogies. I'm a big gamer, so I was like, okay, this is great. So actually, I asked the guy, I'm like, hey, like, I will drop my summer plans and I'll come shadow you because I want to learn from like whatever it is that you know. I want to learn it, and I'll work for free, and I'll be there all day, every day, Monday to Sunday. I don't give a shit. I don't have a life anymore. Let me just learn from you. And he accepted. He was like, come tomorrow. So I went there, and basically I shadowed this guy for 2.5 months. I started like an experimental startup in the clothing industry just to try and prove a point. Sold a couple thousand bandanas. So back then I was like big on bandanas. I thought it was going to be like the next big thing, which it sort of was in festivals. But I sold bandanas to dogs and their owners, right? So he was like, find a niche that has high willingness to pay, right? And where it's like easy to find them. So I was like, okay, bandanas. Well, dogs can wear bandanas. And then I was like, all right, let me cut the bandana in half, sell one half to the owner, the other half to the dog. And that's like a combo deal. So I was actually able to make a couple of K doing that. And by the end of the summer, he needed someone to analyze spreadsheets for one of his clients. I came in and I got a 2-week internship. On my first day, my mindset was very much so I need to find a gold in this CRM. I need to find something that's going to get me a full time job. I actually found $750,000 in closed lost, where when you read the email, you could tell that it wasn't closed lost. Like they misclassified it, or, they fucked up. So two people got fired. They were able to recuperate $300,000 in the following 6 weeks. And I got a full time job as a data analyst. So that was a
That's
week
dope.
before. Yeah, that was a week before school started. I didn't go back to school. I went to the second day of school, and I told the orientation counselor that I was now making as much as my teachers, and therefore it was irrelevant for me to continue my education.
I love that.
That's sort of how it went down. And then I became head of RevOps. I started automating everything, automated over 200 hours per week of processes, saw the company go from 10 to 30 plus $1 million ARR. I was, in charge of all the sales tooling and all the data that the sales reps had access to. So my mind from a very early age was, how do I get, more pipeline velocity? How do we make sure that less deals slip through the cracks? Like I was basically the assistant coach, right? You have the coach, the head of sales, and then you have me basically making sure that everything is covered, that when the sales team goes to a conference or a trade show, we have all their accounts mapped out. They know exactly who they need to talk to, which deals are where. We got all these automated reminders. So I was that guy at like 17, 18. At 19, I had a team of 5 people in my department, including one PhD. Everybody was way older than me and more qualified. And I had, a 7-figure tech budget to tool the sales team. And not just sales. At that point, I was running the data for sales, marketing, support, and finance. So, yeah.
Real quick, if you're a sales leader or you know someone who's looking for support when it comes to cold outreach, cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn outreach, we build SDR and BDR teams for companies or complement their existing teams with top talent, remote SDRs and BDRs that are exceptional in outreach skills. So if you'd like to get in touch, just visit sdrhire.com and book a call with our team. All right, back to the show. How do you spend 7 figures of tech budget?
It's easy. Don't worry.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean that.
Well,
No, I bet. Obviously, somebody needs to make up for those seven figures or $1 million in like revenue. But that kind of paints the picture of, your proclivity at least towards tech and GTM tech and like sales technology. And obviously you were from an early age, very well versed with tech and RevOps. And obviously by 19, you were managing 5 people, which is really impressive. And so I saw that you actually had a couple of startups before, and obviously you mentioned that you burned through $500,000 for that one that you actually posted about today. Were those kind of the lessons that, like, what was the breakthrough that made you start a face to face? I mean, was it like a first idea hit, or I mean, when you were actually considering it, or did you like pivot into it?
Either actually. So
Mm,
one of my one of my previous startups called coldmessage.io, and it was an experiment. It was a
mm,
2 month experiment. It generated about $5,000 in revenue. In retrospect, could have been a smashing success, but all the indicators I had was that the market was going to prefer clay, and I was right. And so to me it was a question of, do I want to build a tool that's not going to be the obvious choice and win the bigger carrot? So I
yeah.
dumped cold message. But while I was building cold message, I had an interesting activation problem. Right? A
Mm,
lot of people were signing up to my software. Like one day we had 400 signups, and they weren't all activating, right? They wouldn't even complete the first key thing, which it's a pretty typical SaaS problem. But I
yeah.
like being like this outside the box guy. I thought, is there a better way to solve this than just to put a bunch of product tours and YouTube videos? And so I came up with a radical solution to this, which was stalk the users. And when they reached a point of critical friction, you freeze their screen and you tell them, Nick, the CEO is calling you. Do you want to accept or decline the call? Right. That was like, I don't know how I came up with that, but basically that I tried it and was able to generate about 20 hours of conversations with my first users in the first month. One of them was head of sales for a company that, so they were going to buy 100 licenses, which at my price point back then would have been $100,000 ARR deal. Needless to say, these were very profitable conversations. It was extremely high value. And I realized that this is something that's missing from every funnel out there. Everybody has a book a demo, everybody has a chat, but there's no way to have an instant sales conversation at the highest point of intent of the buyer. And I find that these are the best possible moments to have these conversations. So I decided to turn that into a tool like a year later.
100%. That's so interesting. And by the way, I'm aware of, I think, one tool that is like this. It's called Warmly. Do you consider them a competitor?
Not really. Wormly does a whole bunch of everything. So
Uh-huh.
they're really good at identifying people on your website. They have a chat which enables you to engage with them. They sort of have a calling feature, but it's not really it allows you to do outbound calls on your website visitors. I wouldn't necessarily it could you could consider them to be an adjacent solution. There's definitely some overlap, but I think that fundamentally the core thesis is different.
Understood. Interesting. Okay. I actually came across, and I think I shared that one with you. Another, let's say, similar tool. Although I think the use case for them was support, customer success. It's called Median, where essentially you can just have a chat directly on the website while the user is browsing the website, and you can then do whatever, right? Share, solve their problems, and obviously there's a use case in sales, there's a use case in CS. But yeah, like, how do you feel that the market is in regards to this type of solution? Like, would you call it saturated? Would you call it like, just a rising star? Like, how would you classify it?
I think we're in a fresh new market. The When I was a head of RevOps, something like this was not even conceivable. Like WebRTC, the technology for web calls, the thing we're using right now through Riverside, it was invented in 2012, 2013. The first real use of it. Like Google Meet came out in 2017, right? So it's a very new thing. And if you look at the trend, which is automation, right? The main trend is automate everything. It 90%, 95% of all startups are in the automation business. Almost nobody is in the human connections business, right? And so the pace of innovation in our corner of the internet is very small, and therefore there aren't a lot of companies which can actually do this for you. If you want to put a live call option inside your funnel, there really aren't that many options.
I see. And what kind of companies are actually engaging you? Like, who's the buyer? Who, like, can I, like, for example, as an SDR, for example, can I use this technology, or is this more for like a RevOps person, as you put it, and then just enabling the SDR or the account executive or the support rep to just jump on a call? What does it even look like in that sense?
Yeah, so pretty much anyone who's customer facing can use it on,
Mm,
the RevOps can be necessary on in the setup and maybe to come up with new experiments, new data flows. It depends what, who you want to talk to. If you want to talk to everybody, which most companies don't, but if you want to talk to everybody, then you might not need any kind of RevOps work. If you do need better segmentation, then the RevOps would come in and integrate face to face with your CRM, integrate it with your product, integrate it with the rest of your funnel. That way, face to face knows who do we want to talk to, who do we not want to talk to, and it can engage the right person at the right time with the right CTA. But you, as a salesperson, once you know who the person is, you can get notified in Slack. It can say like, "Hey, Stefan, Bob, your contact from HubSpot is currently on your website. It's the guy that you have a $20,000 deal with that's currently in quote presented. Want to see what he's looking at?" And then you can click and see what he's looking at. And then with another click of a button, you can call him. And so you will pop up on his screen and it's going to say, "Stefan, your account executive is calling you. Do you want to accept, decline? Do you want to book a meeting for later?" So that's kind of how you would use it as an SDR if we're talking outbound. If we're talking inbound, so less proactive, but you're letting them come to you, you would wait for them to call you. And this is where most likely the RevOps, but usually it's something that we do as part of our implementation, set up the flows which will engage this person automatically. And then when the buyer clicks talk to Stefan, then it connects you.
I like that. So essentially, you have both outbound and inbound flows that you can utilize with the tool, where as outbound, like, you can tap into the CRM, and then as inbound, you can just, I suppose it can understand who the person is on the other side, and then kind of qualify them whether they're actually like worth the time to jump on a video call with them. Awesome. That's really cool, man.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's really cool. So I would expect something like this. Like, do you think it's just a question of like how many people actually see it? Like, what's the uptake rate for the tool? How, because it sounds like a no-brainer to have something like this. It's just silly. So is there, does a company have to be big? Does the company have to have like a robust, infrastructure to be able to utilize a tool like this? Because honestly, I would expect, you already have like a million users and you're a gazillionaire with a product like this.
Yeah, you would think that, right? I
Yeah.
thought the same thing in the beginning. And we signed up a bunch of people, like all kinds of different companies. There's just like anything in life, right? There's an equation which determines your success with an initiative like this. And this equation very much so it takes three factors into account. What we're trying to create is profitable conversations, right? And ideally make it a motion for you, right?
Mhm.
So in order for that to be true, you need to have three things. One, you need to have something that's worth your time, right? So you can't be selling $20 a month subscriptions. It needs to be a substantial ACV. Second of all, you need to have demand, right? So people need to want to talk to you. Your product needs to be It needs to be in demand, right? And the third thing is you need to be able to supply that demand. Usually we have either one or two problems. Problem number one, nobody wants to talk to the company. And so you have a bunch of reps just waiting around and they're not getting any calls. And for that, one of our core competencies at Face to Face is conversion rate optimization. And we are really digging in, especially with our higher ticket clients. We're digging in and trying a bunch of different experiments to try to get the call through number up. But oftentimes it comes down to the demand that they're generating on the marketing side. And if the leads are just not warm at all, like there won't be any calls. The second scenario is that they have so many calls they can't handle them. And that's scenario number two. Scenario number two is a good problem to have if your ACV is high, right? If you have too many calls coming through for $5,000 packages or, anything north of that, you're in a good position. It's a good team to scale. And then, we can come in and even refer services like yours of like, hey, like here, we'll place SDRs in your business. Like you don't have to worry about it. Toll free. We'll charge you a percentage of what you make, whatever, right? There's a lot of ways to make that profitable, which is what Wormly just launched their SDR business, right? Basically
Oh,
on
really?
to solve that problem. Yeah, Warm
Uh-huh.
Agency. Pretty cool. So you have either one of those two
Yeah.
problems, right?
Yeah. 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 You would expect to for something like this to really, really take off, but then the reality hits, and then you see it's either not enough or too many. And this is, I mean, I'm just thinking from a standpoint of like outbound and like how do you get new customers? How do you generate pipeline? Because obviously, on one hand, you either need outbound generated demand where you raise their interest enough that they visit the website, and then you have a conversation with them, I suppose. Or on the other hand, some kind of demand gen from social, from whatever, and then they are coming again to your website, and then you're having conversations with them. What does that look like for you? And you and I had a chat a few nights ago. You're almost like a one-man band when it comes to GTM activities in general. So how does that machine even work? What does that look like for you?
Have you read the book Crossing the Chasm by George Moore? By
Not the
Jeffrey Moore?
whole, not the whole thing, but definitely, yeah, yeah,
So let's look at this. Crossing the Chasm. So this is like a super famous,
yeah,
graph. Any kind of technology. We also call this the technology adoption curve, right? It's the other. This is the name of of this graph, the technology adoption curve. Any kind of new technology, it starts here, and as the technology gets popularized, it moves into the rest of the market. So when you're a tech like ours, which you've probably never even tried this in your life, right? You and I are talking, you're saying how this is super intuitive and whatever, but I'm gonna bet $100 you never actually went on a website and talked to somebody in 60
no,
seconds. How do
no,
you
never,
know? Right. So we are very much so right here. We're
yeah,
selling to innovators and early adopters. This is where we're at. So if you look at our TAM, let's say our TAM is, 7,500 companies, or let's say
right,
10,000 companies is
yeah,
our TAM, right? Our first TAM. We're really only selling to maybe 15% of those companies because within those companies, we need to have people in positions. So let's say the product marketing manager, the sales manager, the VP growth, the head of revenue. These guys need to be in the psychographic profile of an innovator or an early adopter, which is a very small percentage of the population. So we're really playing at odds here. And we're probably going to be playing at these odds for the next year or two. The good news is this model seems to outperform the current model by at least 10x if you look at the profitability of it, right? People have reps waiting all day for calls. They're overpaying for unqualified leads. Their customer acquisition costs are through the roof. Their reps are sitting around the office not doing anything 70% of the day. There's all these inefficiencies which having a simple call now button on the website can help solve. And so it makes sense that as we start proving this model with the early adopters and the other ones, that we slowly start going into mainstream markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we will see mass adoption. So this is kind of how I look at it, Again, in our first 2-3 months of business, we signed up about 50% of our customer base, and we realized that as enthusiastic as these people are, they don't have the processes or the demand for this to be a fit. And so there's a lot of things that need to be true for this to work. There's also a
Mm-hmm.
big cultural piece, which is people today are not used to picking up the phone, right?
Yep.
Even though they like going there and calling people and having answers right away, they're not used to providing answers right away when somebody calls them.
Yeah.
And so this is a big cultural shift which needs to happen in order for this to work out. But yeah, that's effectively what's going on.
I'm just digesting everything that you shared with me here, and definitely, like this is you talk like those old school startup guys where you just talk in startup terms, which is definitely better because it's easier to understand, for example, where your product is on the adoption curve, etc. And what about your own demand generation? And so because you said that you were signing up people left and right, obviously you've hit the wall, or at least you realize that there are some truths, like you said, that need to be true in order for somebody to be successful using a tool like this. And so do you have any certain specific qualification criteria, and like how are you actually going to market? Because I actually think I received some outbound messages from you, like I don't know, like a year ago, something like that. I can assume like it's email, like outbound, like classic outbound. You're active on LinkedIn, so I can assume there's a little bit of like demand generation with the content, and then potentially back and forth DMing on LinkedIn. Like, do I get like am I kind of close to the target there?
Yeah, so I'd say 50% of the customer base came from my connections or from LinkedIn content. 20% came because they saw us on someone else's website, which is, I predict that this is going to be 90% of all of our
Yeah,
signups by the
exactly.
end of next year. And the rest came from outbound, mostly cold email. And the way that, so what I do, right,
Right.
which is really important for anyone that's like in this, that's in a blue ocean, right? You need to message people who are very likely to think that your thing is cool and that it's useful to them in their career. And you need to almost frame it as you just want to talk about it, right?
Mm.
So that's what I'm doing. Like I basically find these big shots, and I'm like, hey man, like I invented this buyer enablement mechanism which helps boost free to paid conversion by 34% in funnel. And I'm like, and I just use these terms, and then I'm like, would you like to brainstorm use cases with me, or like, can I buy you a coffee? And I really go along these lines where I'm effectively positioning myself like a scientist, and I just want to talk about my scientific experiment and the insights that I've gathered and cross reference with another scientist, and we can debate about the science. That's how I position it. That seems to be working really well because a lot of these guys who are getting paid shitloads of money at these companies, well, they kind of think like that. They're these kind of nerdy guys. They're like, usually they have like science or like step physics or some kind of advanced math background, and for them it's all about the stats. Like, can you help
Yeah.
me, can you help my funnel convert 3% better? If my funnel can convert 3% better, that's like an extra $10 million a year for us. So it's like we talk in these terms, and so it's very easy. And even when I sell my software, I'm not selling a software, I'm selling an experiment, right? So I tell them,
Right.
we're going to run these 2-3 experiments inside your funnel. We're going to show it to these people, this copy, this messaging, and we're expecting to see a 2, 3, 4, 5, 10% uplift in this specific metric for this specific profile of person. And so the whole thing is very nerdy and scientific
Mm.
because we're at this stage where the only people who give a shit are those kind of people.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an idea literally coming up right now, which is like, I'm just thinking how I would go to market. I always like my brain is wired that way. Like how would I go to market with something like this? And I'm just thinking, like, how do I sell to one person that can then sell to a lot of people, right? And you must have thought about this as well. And you did mention that for example, Warmly is starting up like an SDR branch, whatever it is, which essentially staffing SDR who will then know how to address the traffic that's coming. And so, what about agencies, meaning like sales agencies? Because there's like everybody and their grandma started a cold outreach agency over the last 2 years. And so, you know, if and when, an agency, for example, like mine, if we come across, a business that has a decent inflow of leads, let's say a few thousand leads, 5,000, I don't know what your criteria are, and they just like they just plug it in, and we just take all the sales calls as a sales agency. You get a sale, we get better results, hopefully, and probably, and they get more money. So that kind of makes sense. Have you kind of considered that approach? And yeah, this is potentially a pitch.
No, I like it. I mean, I've had this conversation multiple times with multiple sales agencies. None of them have, I think, gone at length to actually get a pilot going.
Mm,
I think like the main thing you can expect from this as a sales agency is you will go from a 50, 40, 30, 60% no-show rate to a 0% no-show rate, right?
mm.
That's probably like the one thing. So your velocity at this level will increase, right? You'll be able to do more calls per day than you're currently doing just because of this unit economic right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. And then obviously it becomes a triage process where like, okay, so how do we exclude the ones that are just, unqualified completely, or especially when they're like cold audience that I don't know who they are. But again, good problems to have, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're great problems to have. I mean, look, it's really easy. Like the way that we operate when we close these big companies is we tell them we're going to start with no filtering.
Hmm.
So we'll show it to as many people as possible. That'll give us our, big net, the big net
Yeah,
benchmark. And then we'll start loop closing in from there to get to the most profitable, most frequent conversations we can get to.
I like it. Interesting. And how many projects can you guys can simultaneously run? Because it sounds like it's not a classic SaaS play where here's the product, and go and pay me my 97% margin. It's more like it seems like, at least at this point in the company's development, that you are, well, fairly involved with every client that you sign up, almost like an agency.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've never bought, and then back when I was running the RevOps department, right? There was never a powerful software that you bought, you just plugged it in and it worked. You
So.
always have, whenever we're talking powerful technology, there is always a tinkering required in order to make it work for you,
Mm,
right? And so currently we do all that tinkering with our clients because we're learning as much as they are about what's
makes
possible with
sense.
this, and we're the ultimate implementation partner they can have at this point. Eventually, this will most likely get branched off into implementation partners who will be handling they'll be charging, it can be CRO specialists, web designers, all kinds of different funnel builders and growth hackers that could be taking care of the implementation
Yeah,
on behalf of
yeah,
the clients, head of growth, GTM engineers, like all these guys should be qualified. And then they'll be able to use our resources, our best practices to deliver the same kind of results that we were able to get. Currently, we're the ones doing that. We have capacity. It's not a lot of work. Like we can probably onboard 20, 30 companies per month. And we're talking, 5-figure deals.
yeah.
So it's a
Understood.
lot of capacity. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And we should start slowly wrapping up, but I'm curious, and this is probably something you get a lot with, I guess, when you talk with maybe investors or somebody who's like forward looking. How does AI play into all of this? Because we've, at least in my world, you've probably seen this as well. AI is like
very dominantly taking over any sales development activities and a lot of like sales and closing activities. And so, have you thought about it? Is it like on the roadmap? How are you guys thinking about AI paired with your tool? Like, would AI take over these sales calls? Is that something you'd be planning on developing? Like, what are you guys thinking, if at all?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is like a very important topic. Look, AI is going to automate the whole everything that happens pre-sales and post-sales, right? So out of the conversation, when you're not talking with a prospect, that's going to get heavily automated by AI. Even preparing quote presentations, preparing any kind of, you know, anything that happens outside of the conversation, it will
Mhm.
help reps be more efficient, and it will help reps have even more time that's allocatable towards conversations, right? The one thing you want your reps who are like hopefully, highly skilled, highly trained, tons of years of experience, the one thing you want them doing is spending time talking face to face, right? Brian Tracy, the famous Brian Tracy, right? He talks about this. He's like, you want to double your revenue, double the amount of time your reps spend talking to customers.
Yeah.
And this is really like, before being a SaaS founder, I'm a RevOps guy, right? And for me, the number one thing I was looking at in RevOps is what works, right? And we want to do more of what works really well, and we want to do less of what doesn't yield an ROI.
Yeah.
So anything that's like prospecting, building lists of accounts, monitoring signals, like all this stuff, which is super important, you don't need to do it. You don't need a human doing it. You don't need to waste time on that. When I started at that company, they had assistants doing that, right? Today,
Yeah.
we don't need assistants. We can have AI. That's all great. But there's a huge portion of the time that your reps have, which is being reallocated towards from all these activities towards nothing, right? And so sales teams right now are shrinking. In the meantime, they still have the old inefficient funnel of fill up a form with 12 fields, wait 2 days, get emailed by a junior SDR so that you can schedule a call back in 3 days. And then, a week goes by before you ever see a demo, before you ever talk to an expert who actually knows what they're talking about. And this process is extremely inefficient. And I think that we can give reps the power. The AI will give reps the power to spend their time doing more things that matter, and face to face is going to help them do those things that matter, right? It's have more conversations. This is how I think about it. On the topic of will AI have the conversations instead of the reps, I think that's an extremely interesting experiment. It has yet to be demonstrated that AI doesn't ruin your conversion rate in an enterprise setting where you're closing 5-figure deals. Everybody I talk to, every sales leader I've talked to, nobody is currently testing this out. There is zero faith in it for the moment. Will that change? I don't know. Personally, based on, I have a bit of a background in psychology. I don't think that this is something that's going to change, but it might. And if it does, for us, it's about 5 lines of code to let an AI jump on a face to face
Yeah.
call. So,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't make a lot of difference to you guys. All right. Well, I appreciate you for sharing this. And so, two things for the end. So, one is, what are some of the people that you like following across LinkedIn or maybe social that are kind of influencing you either as a founder or as a salesperson? Because that's definitely what you are. And then secondly, it's going to be, where can people find you?
yeah, I don't know. I'm not really big on that. I get most of my knowledge from, I guess, YouTube. So I think
That's
I think
fine.
yeah, if you want to follow somebody, like some interesting guys to follow, I would say are Nick Volkovsky. I think Wes Bush is also super interesting if you're into SaaS and product led funnels. I would also follow Glenn and Stefan from Expanding. These guys are cool. But yeah, these are also all my boys. So it's hard for me. I can't think of anybody else. I'm sorry.
That's fair. No, that's fair. And so I assume people can find you on LinkedIn as Nick Tomic.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, YouTube,
There we go. Awesome, man.
email.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right. Well, for as like a closing note, is there a message that you would like to send either to like a founders community that's following, or maybe the SDRs and sales folks that are following the podcast and all of this? Is there a message that you would like to kind of give them?
Yeah, I mean, to the SDRs, I would say start talking to your managers, like start floating the idea around, like, hey, like, what if we didn't have to have a Calendly and we could just, jump right away on calls? Start gauging that. If any deal closes, I will personally give you 20% of the transaction size. So if you're our champion at any of these companies and you bring us in, like, they don't need to know about it. I'm not going to tell. So that's one thing. And if you want to discuss it with me, regardless of any kind of, deal or anything like that, if you think this idea is cool and you have questions, feel free to message me. I'm always super happy to jump on calls and toss ideas around.
That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you. I love that we connected. You've been kind of in my vicinity for the last, I don't know, like a year or so, but we haven't had a chance to connect. And so I think this was a good opportunity for something like that. Shout out to the folks that you yourself shouted out. And then, yeah, I guess I'll see you around. You're on LinkedIn. I'll definitely try and find a potential pilot maybe with some of my clients there to potentially do this with. Maybe we can just talk offline for some parameters there, but definitely a very, very interesting concept for which I would love to be an evangelist for. But yeah, thank you for hopping on. I know you're a busy guy, and it was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, all right?